On my 30th birthday, they handed me a gift-wrapped envelope. It wasn't a card. It was an eviction notice from my own parents in the house I'd spent 5 years restoring with my savings, my hands, my heart. I'm Vivien, and what started as heartbreak turned into a full-blown war for the truth, one that exposed a $3 million real estate scheme, ripped my family apart, and forced me to choose give up or fight back with everything I had. What would you do if the people who raised you tried to erase you for profit? Tell me in the comments, because this isn't just my story. It might be yours too. The silver envelope shimmered beneath the warm glow of string lights I'd hung myself last weekend. Tiny glass bulbs, gently swinging above the porch, just like my grandmother used to do for fall gatherings. I thought it was a card, something heartfelt. Maybe even a note from my parents telling me how proud they were. After 5 years of sanding, scraping, sealing, sweating, of living with no air conditioning some summers, no working oven some winters, I thought tonight might be the night they'd finally say it out loud. I was wrong. The envelope sat on top of the dessert plate, nestled between a half-eaten slice of red velvet cake and my grandmother's antique silver fork. My mother pushed it toward me like it was nothing more than a birthday card, just another Hallmark sentiment. Her smile was tight, rehearsed. My father avoided eye contact entirely, fiddling with his phone under the table like a kid hiding a comic book during church. Kella was the only one who looked excited. She wore a champagne-colored dress that sparkled a bit too loudly for a family dinner. Her smile stretched too far, like she already knew what was inside. "Open it, sweetie," my mom said, her voice brittle with too much cheer. I glanced around the room. My older brother Jace was leaning against the fireplace, arms crossed, eyes distant. Paisley, my best friend and the only person here who hadn't shared my DNA, stood in the corner of the living room, hands tucked into the sleeves of her cardigan, watching everything with the quiet focus of someone who'd learned long ago how to read the room. I tore the envelope open. The paper was thick, heavy, not the kind you use for birthday greetings. There were no colorful fonts, no glitter, no "Happy 30th." Instead, there was a header in all caps, "Notice of eviction." I stared at it for a long moment, willing the words to rearrange themselves into something else. "What is this?" My voice cracked down the center, barely louder than a whisper. My mother folded her hands in her lap. "Vivien, honey, we've been talking about this for a while." "With who?" I asked, blinking. "Because you haven't been talking to me." Stella leaned forward, elbows grazing the tablecloth. "Technically, the deed is still in your parents' names. Legally, it's their property. And with how the market's been, well, it's a great time to make a change." "A change?" I repeated. "What kind of change involves evicting your daughter on her birthday?" "There've been concerns," my father mumbled. "Some things brought to our attention." "Concerns?" I turned toward Chella, already knowing. "From you?" She tilted her head, her smile cool. "There have been complaints. From neighbors. And unpermitted work. Structural changes without documentation. I just thought you should know before it caused real legal trouble." I felt something shift in my spine. "I have every permit in a binder upstairs," I said quietly. "I've logged every inspection, every contractor. There's nothing illegal in this house except what you're trying to do right now." My mother reached for my hand. I pulled away. "You knew how much this house meant to me," I said, staring at her. "I poured my entire savings into it. Every wall, every board, every window. You let me believe this was mine." "It's not personal," Stella said, standing now. "It's just business. We're all adults here." No one else moved. Jay shifted against the fireplace but said nothing. The jazz record I'd put on earlier kept spinning softly in the background. The lights I'd carefully wrapped around the banister twinkled like they were mocking me. The scent of cinnamon and vanilla hung in the air from the homemade candles I'd set out, and suddenly it felt like I didn't belong in any of it. "You're kicking me out," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Of the house I rebuilt on my birthday." No one said a word. I stood slowly, holding the eviction notice in one hand like it might catch fire. I walked over to the coffee table and let it fall. The plates rattled. "Get out," I said. "Vivien," my mother began. "Number all of you, get out." They didn't argue. One by one, they stood. My father gave me a squeeze on the shoulder that landed like a pat from a stranger. My mother whispered something I didn't catch. Sela offered a pitying look, the kind that made me want to scream. Jace lingered at the doorway for half a second before stepping into the night. Only Paisley stayed. She walked to the front door, locked it, then turned and looked at me with that fierce, protective gaze I'd known since college. "This wasn't spur of the moment," she said. "She's been planning something." My throat felt tight, but I nodded. "She's always been jealous," Paisley continued, "of how your grandma chose you, of how this house became yours." I sat down on the couch, still surrounded by the remnants of a celebration that had never been real. A deflated balloon bounced against the wall behind me. "She's planning something bigger," I whispered. "She didn't just want me out. She wants this place gone." Paisley crouched next to me. "Then we figure it out. You're not alone." She left half an hour later. I stayed in the silence, letting the stillness wrap around me like a question I couldn't yet answer. I poured a glass of wine. The bottle shook in my hand. I picked up my phone and scanned through my missed calls and notifications. Most were junk. One was a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. I played it. "Hey, just confirming. Sela said we're good to proceed with the survey next Tuesday. I'll swing by with the crew around 9 unless we hear otherwise. Thanks again." My hand clenched around the stem of the wine glass. The survey. She was planning to sell. She was planning to tear it down. And she wasn't even waiting for me to leave. I looked around the room, at the wallpaper I'd stripped and restored, the floorboards I'd stained by hand, the fireplace I'd retiled myself over a freezing winter break. All of it was mine. Every inch carried the echo of scraped knuckles and long nights and the warmth of memory, and now they wanted to erase it. A slow breath filled my lungs. My heartbeat steadied, not with calm, but with clarity. She thought I would leave quietly. She thought I'd break. But if she truly believed that, then Sela didn't know me at all. Not anymore. Not ever. My walls still smelled like fresh paint. I'd picked that color myself, Windsor Mist. Soft, calming, neutral, but with just enough personality to feel like me. I'd spent hours on my hands and knees patching drywall, choosing fixtures, debating the right trim shade. Now all I could picture was a roller soaked in sterile white paint, erasing me one layer at a time. I stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by evidence of everything I'd built, and suddenly, it didn't feel like mine anymore. 2 months ago at brunch, Sela had said something I couldn't shake. "If you ever get tired of playing homeowner, I know people who'd pay top dollar for that space." At the time, I'd laughed it off. I thought it was a dig cloaked in compliment. Now it echoed in my ears like a warning I'd ignored. I pulled out my phone and dialed my mother. She answered on the second ring, voice breathy like she'd been expecting the call. "Vivien, I want to see the complaints and the permits, the ones Sela showed you." She hesitated. "Honey, I don't have them. Sela handled all of that. So, you didn't verify any of it? She told us she had documentation. That's not what I asked. Silence. Then softly, "You've always been so sensitive about the house." I hung up before I said something I'd regret. Paisley was already seated at the kitchen island, laptop open, a legal pad covered in scribbles. "We need hard evidence," she said without looking up. "You said her fiancé's company is Valrum?" "Yeah. Historic teardowns, boutique condos, the kind with elevated living and rooftop pickleball." She snorted. "Disgusting." I nodded toward the screen. "Let's see what we can find." 3 Google searches and a couple of city records later, we were staring at a listing. Upcoming development proposals, Charleston Districts 3 to 5. Among them was a map. I leaned in. My street was highlighted in orange, my block, my house, labeled Proposed Redevelopment Zone. The air left my lungs. Paisley clicked into the PDF. "It was filed 2 months ago," she said. "Before your birthday. Before the eviction." "They were preparing to sell the house before they even told me," I said, my voice flat. "You need someone inside planning," she said. "Amanda?" Amanda worked the front desk at the city planning office. She was also a former roommate of Paisley's from a brief era of roommate roulette back in college. "She owes me," Paisley said, grabbing her keys. "Let's go." The Charleston Planning Office was tucked in a red brick building off Calhoun Street. The reception area smelled like burnt coffee and old printer paper. Amanda looked up when we entered, her eyebrows lifting. "Wow, haven't seen you in years," she said to Paisley. "What's going on?" "We need help," Paisley replied. "And it's a big one." 10 minutes later, we were sitting behind her cubicle with a stack of public development records between us. "These are all the proposals filed in the past 6 months," Amanda said. "Valrom's filed 3, one of them for your block." I scanned the pages. There it was. My street, my address, my name listed nowhere. Amanda pulled another file from the drawer. "There's something else." She handed me a survey request, dated 3 weeks before my birthday. It bore my parents' signatures. My chest tightened. They signed this before they even gave me the eviction notice. Paisley's hand rested gently on mine. They'd already decided. Everything else was theater. My phone buzzed. A text from Jace. "Meet me at Wren's Coffee in 20. I have something you need to know." Wren's was tucked between a florist and a used bookstore on Broad Street, the kind of place that made lavender lattes and spelled your name wrong on purpose. Jace was already in the corner booth, stirring a tea he probably wouldn't drink. "You knew," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. He didn't argue. "I found out the morning of your party," he said. "Mom said not to say anything. They swore it was temporary, that they were just protecting you from making bad choices." I laughed, short and bitter. "Like trusting my own family?" He winced. "Tella's been whispering to them for months. She showed them paperwork, told them you were in over your head, that if you lost the house to foreclosure, it'd be worse than selling it now. I'm not behind on anything. I've never missed a payment, and I have the permits. I know that now." "Then why didn't you speak up?" "Because I thought maybe, just maybe, it was true, and because she's very good at this." I leaned back, staring out the window. A young couple walked by, hand in hand, laughing. "Valrom's behind it, isn't it?" Jace nodded. "Her fiancé. His company wants to redevelop the whole block. Boutique townhomes, pre-sold. She's trying to lock it down before the end of the fiscal year." "By stealing my house," I said. "She thinks you'll walk away. She doesn't know me." He slid a manila folder across the table. "This is everything I could get from her emails. She's meeting a contractor today at the house. She thinks you've given up." My stomach dropped. Another text buzzed in, from Jace again. She's at the house, with someone, talking about staging the interior. Viv, she's already measuring windows. I stood so fast my chair scraped the floor. "Where are you going?" he asked. "To remind her I'm still here." I used to dream about decorating this porch with fall garlands, twisting them around the railing, wrapping cinnamon-scented lights through the banisters, laying out pumpkins in mismatched colors like my grandmother used to. I pictured laughter here, dinner parties, a place to breathe, a place to begin again. Now it had a red X spray-painted across the steps, the kind they use on condemned buildings, or for demolition targets. I stood frozen, key still in my hand. For a split second, I wondered if this was just a mistake. Kids tagging things, a prank. But deep down I knew. This wasn't random. This was a message. My phone buzzed in my back pocket. I yanked it out without looking. Jace. She's still there. Kitchen. With some guy in a button-down. Looks like a contractor. I pushed the door open so hard it bounced off the stopper. Inside, the living room looked like a showroom. My books had been stacked into color-coded piles. Throw blankets I didn't own were draped over the couch, and in the middle of it all stood Chella, gesturing with polished hands. "I told you the natural light in the mornings is insane," she was saying. She froze when she saw me. "Well, this is awkward," she said, not even pretending to look guilty. The man next to her cleared his throat. "Apologies. We were just—" "She doesn't live here," I said. "She has no authority to be here." "We were just reviewing staging potential," Sella said sweetly. "It's all in process." "Process? You mean trespassing, manipulation, fraud?" She gave a tiny shrug. "Vivien, we just want what's best for the neighborhood." "Best for who? You? Your fiancé? His company?" Jace stepped in from the hallway, arms crossed. "This isn't about the neighborhood. You've been planning this for months." Sella's smile faltered. "Don't be dramatic." "You spray-painted the porch," I said. "That wasn't me." "You sent a contractor before the house was legally vacated." "That's not— Look, I'm not the enemy here." "You forged permits," I snapped, "and I have proof." The contractor looked between us like he'd walked into a family Thanksgiving gone nuclear. "I think I should go," he muttered, grabbing his clipboard and heading out the door. The room deflated. Sella adjusted the sleeve of her blazer. "You can't stop progress, Vivien. Watch me." Later that afternoon, I sat in my parents' living room, documents spread across the coffee table like a legal crime scene. Amanda had emailed me PDFs of everything, the survey orders, the permit applications, the redevelopment maps. All of them pointed to one thing: intent. Robert stood stiffly by the window, arms crossed. Eleanor sat on the sofa with her hands clasped too tightly, knuckles white. "I don't understand," my mother whispered. "She said it was temporary, that it would protect you." "Protect me?" I laughed. "By throwing me out of my home?" "She said you were behind on repairs, that the neighborhood was filing complaints. All false, all forged. You didn't even ask me." Robert stepped forward, his voice quiet. "Is this really from the city?" "Yes. Amanda pulled it herself." He studied the paper. "I didn't know she'd filed anything. I thought we were just authorizing a basic valuation. She used your signatures to file a redevelopment permit and filed a request for demolition markers." Eleanor looked up sharply. "Demolition? She wants to bulldoze this place, Mom." No one spoke. That evening, I got a text from an unknown number. "Meet me outside Palmetto and King. 6 p.m., alone." It was signed Leah, Sella's future sister-in-law. I almost didn't go, but Paisley convinced me. If she's reaching out, she's already questioning something. Leah was already waiting when I arrived. standing in front of a florist's window. She looked smaller than I remembered. Softer, somehow. "I can't stay long," she said. "If Valentine finds out I'm helping you." "Why are you?" She took a breath. "Because I saw how she spoke about you at dinner, and because I found these." She handed me a flash drive and a manila envelope. Inside were screenshots, emails between Sela and Valentine. "Historic eyesores ripe for upscale development," I read aloud. "Wow, poetic." "There's more," Leah said. "They've been trying to fast-track construction permits through a back channel. Valentine's father has friends on the board." I nodded, flipping to the next page. So, she needed me out fast. She needed this house vacant, no resistance, clean paperwork. She forged things. I didn't know until last week. "I believe you," I said. She pulled out her phone. "I also have video." She tapped play. The screen showed Cella's father sitting at a desk, rubber stamping stacks of paper. Leah zoomed in. "Those are blank lines," she whispered. "No content, just signature and stamp." My stomach turned. She looked at me carefully. "They've crossed legal lines. You need to move quickly." "I will." She started to walk away, then paused. "You're stronger than she thinks." Back at home, Amanda texted me a new photo, a shot of my living room. Spray-painted X's lined the baseboards. The dining room wall had one, bright red, right above the fireplace mantel. A second photo showed my hallway mirror, shattered. Then came the final one, scrawled across my front door in sharp, chalky white. "Final warning." I stared at it for a long moment. Then I smiled. Just a little. "Good," I whispered. "They're nervous." They gave me an eviction notice on my birthday. Tonight, I give them something better. Truth in front of an audience. It was October 30th, a Friday. The air carried that damp, salty crispness Charleston gets in late fall, somewhere between humid memory and impending cold. I stood in front of the restaurant's glass doors, watching warm light pool across the floorboards inside. Laughter floated out. Jazz music spilled into the street like honey. It could have been any other rehearsal dinner, except this one was the final act of a lie. Sela had always said, "Public image is everything. You control the room, you control the story." Tonight, I was taking the room back. Beside me stood Sarah, my attorney, calm and unreadable, and Leah, jaw tight, eyes fixed forward. Paisley and Jace were already inside. Leah adjusted the strap of her bag, where 3 USB drives and 4 printed binders were tucked neatly beside a lipstick case. "You ready?" she asked. I exhaled. "Let's change the narrative." We walked in just as Tella's father was finishing a toast. Wine glasses clinked gently across the room. People turned as the doors opened. First confusion, then recognition. I held their gaze. The hostess moved instinctively toward us, but Sarah handed her a card. "City Attorney, here to deliver documentation to relevant board members." The woman stepped back immediately. Tella spotted me from the head table. For a beat, her face froze. Then the smile returned. The stage smile. The smile she wore when she needed to look like she was above it all. "Vivien," she said, gliding over. "How unexpected." "Surprises make the evening memorable," I replied. She turned to Leah, voice brittle. "You brought her here?" Leah folded her arms. "I invited her." Kella's eyes flicked to the guests, then to Sarah. "If this is some kind of scene—" "Oh, it is," I cut in. "But I'm not the one who built it. You did. I'm just the one pulling back the curtain." Leah moved to the main exit, casually blocking it as Sarah began handing out folders. One to a city board member, one to a woman in a navy dress I recognized as Valentine's family attorney, two to men in sharp suits with Valram pins on their lapels. "What is this?" someone asked. "Truth," I said, stepping forward to the center of the room. "For those who deserve to hear it." A microphone had been left on the dessert table, likely for after-dinner speeches. I picked it up. "Hi. Most of you know me. For those who don't, I'm Vivien Harding. I own the house on 32 Ashwood. Or at least, I thought I did." The jazz trio stopped playing. Forks paused midair. Even Valentine looked up from his wine. "On my birthday," I continued, "I was handed an eviction notice. From my own family. The reason? False accusations of mismanagement and an urgent need to protect me from myself." I paused. But here's what actually happened. My cousin, Chella, worked with her fiancé's company, Valram Redevelopment, to file false permit documents. She used my parents' trust and their signatures to submit requests to the city planning office to have my home, my grandmother's home, surveyed, sold, and demolished. A murmur moved through the room. "I have the signed filings. I have the timeline. I have video footage of her father." I nodded at the man at the corner table, stamping blank documents with notary approval. People started whispering. One investor stood up and walked to the bar. "Why?" I said, voice steady. "Because the house sits on a valuable lot in a historic district. Because they wanted to build luxury condos before year end. And because Sela said..." I tapped Sarah's laptop. The projector behind the band switched on. Footage rolled. A video file. Sela's voice clear as daylight. "Once it's gone, she's got no fight left, and I'll finally have what should have been mine." Silence. Then, a single sharp inhale from the back. Valentine stood slowly, face pale. He picked up the folder Sarah had handed him and flipped through the pages. "This can't be right," he said. "You told me..." "Sela, you said her family was on board, that the permits were clean." Chella said nothing. "You told me this was already cleared with the city, that she was moving out voluntarily." More silence. "You forged city documents?" someone whispered. I looked at my parents. Eleanor's eyes were glossy. Robert had gone pale. "On my birthday, I got an eviction notice," I said to them. "Tonight, you get a reality check. I'm not your shame anymore. I'm your mirror." Sela stepped toward me. "You want to do this here, in front of everyone?" "No," I said. "You already did. I'm just finishing what you started." She turned to Valentine. "You're going to let her ruin this?" He didn't answer. Instead, he turned to the room. "The wedding's off," he said simply, "and I'll be withdrawing Valram's interest in Ashwood." Gasps, then chairs scraping. Several investors began gathering their things. The family lawyer closed her folder and walked out without a word. Sarah leaned in. "City Ethics Board opens on Monday. We'll be filing by 9 a.m. Eleanor sat down at the nearest table, head in her hands. I didn't feel triumphant, just clear. Outside, the air had turned colder. I was halfway to the curb when Sela caught up to me, heels clicking against the brick walkway. "You think this is over?" she hissed. I turned slowly. "No," I said, "but you're finished pretending to be the victim." She opened her mouth to respond, but Leah stepped between us. "Don't," she said. "You've done enough." Sela glared at her. "You backstabbed me." "You embarrassed yourself," Leah replied. "I just brought the mirror." Later that night, over tea at Paisley's apartment, my phone buzzed again. "Leah, I'm resigning from the wedding party, and I have all the internal memos. You'll want them for the ethics case." I stared at the screen, then looked around the room. Paisley handed me a blanket. "One step at a time, huh?" I smiled faintly. Yeah, but tonight? We took a leap. They tried to strip this place down to drywall and profit margins, but this house has its own memory, and it remembers love. I stood in the living room with a dust rag in one hand and a coffee mug in the other. Sunlight filtered through the lace curtains like it used to when I was 5, sitting on the floor with a crayon in one hand and my grandmother's voice humming somewhere in the kitchen. Now, decades later, I was humming to myself. Not the same song, but the same feeling. Paisley was upstairs vacuuming, and the sound came in waves. Somewhere behind me, a paint roller clunked against a ladder. The air smelled like lemon oil and fresh caulk. And something else. Hope. I wasn't sure I was ready. But maybe it wasn't about readiness anymore. Maybe it was just time. Robert looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just softer, as if guilt had shaved down the edges. Eleanor held a box to her chest, her expression unreadable. I know it's late, he began, but we're here, and we're ready to help, if you'll let us. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stepped aside and held the door open. They spent the afternoon hauling debris to the curb, sweeping baseboards, and wiping down kitchen cabinets. Eleanor unpacked the box slowly in the dining room. Old photos, recipes, and letters. She slid one envelope toward me across the table. This was in your grandmother's sewing kit. We didn't open it. I unfolded the letter, my grandmother's writing again, this time shakier. If you're reading this, they tried to take the house. You know what to do. Don't give them an inch. But once you win, don't harden. Make this place a home again. Fill it with people, with laughter, with second chances. Tears blurred my vision, but I blinked them back. I looked at my mother. You knew she wanted me to have it. I was jealous, she said quietly, that she chose you. I thought, maybe if I ignored it, the feeling would go away, but it didn't. She took a deep breath. I'm sorry, Vivien, for all of it. Outside, the porch railing creaked. I peeked through the curtain. Valentine stood there holding a drill and a long board of cedar. He didn't knock. He didn't speak. He just measured, marked, and began replacing the broken rail, like a man who knew apologies didn't always come with words. Should I stop him? Paisley asked from behind me. No, I said. Let him do something right for once. The next morning, Leah met us at the city council office with a stack of documents and a cup of black coffee that she handed me like a peace offering. I filed the motion, she said. Pending a full ethics review, all Valram projects in the district are on hold. Thank you, I said. I also had an idea, she added. What if we created a historic community preservation fund? In your grandmother's name? Not just for grand estates, but small homes too. Real families. That's only worth doing, I said, if it helps people who've been overlooked. This house mattered because of who lived here, not just what it looked like. Leah smiled. Exactly. By the weekend, word had spread. Mrs. Rodriguez from across the street knocked on my door with a crock pot of chili. Mr. Thomas brought folding chairs. A group of teens from the next block over showed up with string lights, a Bluetooth speaker, and a lot of unsolicited dance moves. The neighborhood was planning something I hadn't seen in years. A lawn potluck. The kind my grandmother used to host. The kind where stories were traded for lemonade, and someone always brought a pie that never quite set in the middle. They didn't ask permission. They just started setting up tables on my grass like it was the most natural thing in the world. And maybe it was. Robert grilled hot dogs on a tiny charcoal stove he claimed hadn't seen the light of day since 1997. Eleanor passed around copies of her mother's peach cobbler recipe like it was a family heirloom. Valentine stood in the back, holding a plate and saying little. Jace introduced himself to a neighbor's toddler like he was auditioning for Uncle Duties. Even the city preservation office showed up, bringing pamphlets, not lectures. As dusk settled in, I found myself atop a stepladder, hanging the last set of string lights. Eleanor steadied the ladder from below. "Your grandmother would be so proud," she said, looking up at me. I smiled, adjusting the final bulb. "She's here," I said, "every time we choose to stay. This time last month, I lost everything. Tonight, I found more than I ever thought I had." The lawn shimmered with soft light as dusk settled over Charleston. Folding chairs were scattered across the grass like open invitations. Casserole dishes lined 2 tables under a canvas tent. Kids darted around barefoot, laughter trailing behind them like kites. And I stood beneath the oak tree, one hand resting gently against my chest, where my grandmother's locket lay. Inside was the same faded photo. Her, standing proudly in front of the house, her smile calm, certain. The porch behind her still had the original white banister. She wore a yellow dress I'd only ever seen in pictures, but the spirit of it felt alive tonight, woven into every laugh, every shared plate, every warm breeze that carried the scent of jasmine across the yard. "Hey," Paisley said, nudging me lightly. "You okay?" "I think I might be," I said, for the first time in a long time. News had spread quickly. Earlier that afternoon, the city council had formally blocked all Valram development proposals within our district. Leah had been appointed interim ethics officer, a title she wore with quiet strength. I saw her now by the drinks table, pouring sweet tea and answering questions from residents who'd only ever known her as the pretty one in family photos. Now they were starting to see her for what she really was. Sharp, principled, and brave. Mrs. Rodriguez handed me a warm plate. "Your grandmother used to serve empanadas every Sunday night," she said. "She made extra for anyone who dropped by." I smiled. She believed people needed a reason to gather, and food always worked. Across the lawn, Robert sat in a circle of folding chairs, telling childhood stories about hiding candy under the floorboards and sneaking onto the roof during thunderstorms. People chuckled, asked questions. Some even clapped. I watched him lean back with a look I hadn't seen in years. Ease. Next to him, Eleanor read aloud from a recipe card, her voice cracking on certain words. It was her mother's handwriting. She held it like something sacred. Meanwhile, Jace helped hoist a string of lights between the house and the nearest tree. Paisley coordinated a sidewalk hopscotch tournament with 5 neighborhood kids and 1 wildly competitive dad. Even Valentine showed up, quiet, humble, still unsure where to stand but willing to lift what needed lifting. No one pushed him to talk. He just worked, head down, hands steady. As the sky turned lavender, I stood on the front porch barefoot, locket still pressed close, watching everyone move like a memory brought back to life. I stepped down slowly, clearing my throat. "Can I say something?" I called out. Chairs turned, conversations hushed. I never thought I'd be here like this. I never thought I'd have to fight to stay in the place where I grew up, where my grandmother taught me how to bake cornbread and stand up straight. A pause. They tried to take this place from me, but they forgot. I was never fighting for walls. I was fighting for history, for voice, for the right to belong. I let the silence settle around that sentence, let it root itself into the soil beneath our feet. And I think, I added, voice softening, we all belong a little more tonight. Someone clapped. Then a few more followed, not loud, not theatrical, just real. As people turned back to their conversations, I stayed still, letting the warmth of it all wash over me. Paisley approached with a cupcake, a tiny flickering candle set gently in the frosting. "You didn't get one last time," she said. I took it carefully, eyes stinging. "Make a wish," she added. I didn't close my eyes. Didn't need to. I held up the locket instead and whispered, "This time, I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." Wind chimes tinkled in the distance. The porch behind me creaked in a familiar rhythm. Someone put on a slow jazz track from an old speaker. I stayed outside a while longer, barefoot, grounded. The house wasn't just saved. It was alive again. And so was I. The evening breeze carried the scent of jasmine, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was holding my breath. With my grandmother's locket close to my heart and the porch full of laughter again, I knew I hadn't just saved a house. I'd reclaimed a home. Sometimes the fight isn't about land or legal papers. It's about being seen, being heard, and holding on to the roots that shaped you. In this life, homes aren't just built from wood and nails. They're made from forgiveness, courage, and choosing to stay when it's easier to walk away. If this story stirred something in you, I'd love to hear what home means to you. Leave a thought, share a memory, or just let someone you love know they belong.